So we're going to be looking today at activities to aid learning. So really in our session today, we're going to be talking about how we can make the most out of children's learning. How can we build on children's learning to make sure it instills in their minds and that they can keep building on their knowledge from the basics, from the foundation to a higher level. So inshallah, we'll look at and talk about some activities today. I would also like, definitely, this session is going to be a bit more practical, and I would like you all to have some input in this because definitely, I mean, as always, as teachers, we can always learn from each other's experiences. Inshallah, during this session, I hope you'll be able to give your input and your ideas as well as we go along. So just to give you an idea of what we'll be covering today, we're going to talk a bit about learning styles, Bloom's taxonomy, that you may have heard of before, which is the idea behind the learning. Outstanding activities. We'll talk about a bit about spiral learning, and then inshallah we'll have a bit of time to share some good practice. So hopefully you can put together some lessons because trainings are all good and we can give you a lot of theory and I can give you lots and lots of ideas, but until you do it practically and prepare things yourself and have ideas for yourself, it doesn't go into the classroom or into your lesson. So it's really important that we put this into the learning that you everything that you learn into practice. And then inshallah we have a question and answer session. So before we begin, actually, I would just like you to just put in the chat if you've been part of the session courses on our first and second sessions with MUS, just so I have an idea who's been to my previous sessions during this course of trainings. So if you can just add that if you just put into the chat yes or no, just so I know if you've attended any of the other ones. Okay, good. So because I'm hoping to refer back to some of the things that we've spoken about, all of the learning is linked. Brilliant. So lots of you have been. Okay, great. And last time if you remember, we spoke about behavior management and all of these link into having good lessons and ultimately children learning to the best of their abilities. Okay, brilliant. Okay, great. So thank you for that. So to begin with, I am going to be talking about learning styles. And it's really important that before we plan activities for our children, before we decide what children are going to be doing, we understand how children learn. So there are many, many different learning styles that have come out, but the three main learning styles that have been, looked into and, researched are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And these are three main types of learning that children learn in, or even us as adults. Okay, so we might be visual learners. So you might like to see graphs or pictures, illustrations, maybe videos, and that might be the way in which you learn best. So normally individuals have one of these areas which is more dominant, so which they prefer to learn in. Okay, we have auditory, which is more about listening to things, so maybe videos or presentations, perhaps talking. And then you also have the kinesthetic, and this is a lot more practical. So this is like the hands-on learning, where the children or the adults are doing more. They're actually maybe making something, or they're doing some role play. So they're doing a bit more practically, and that helps them to learn. So obviously, it's important for us to know our children and to know which sort of style that they learn in best, because we can then use that in order to aid their learning. But what's also interesting is for us as teachers, is that our learning style, so whichever learning style we're most, confident in or we learn best in, is usually the learning style that we present our lessons in as well, because that's how we like things. So, for example, I'm a kinesthetic learner and I like to do a lot of practical activities. And when I do my lessons, a lot of my lessons are practical. So what I need to think about is making sure that if I have the visual learners and the auditory learners in my lessons, how am I also making sure that they can get the best out of the lesson? How am I also, catering for their needs as well? So to begin with, I thought it would be nice for us just to do a quick quiz or questionnaire to find out for yourselves what sort of learner you are. So I'm going to share in the chat a web link, and if you can open that up and answer the questions, it will tell you what sort of learner you are. So actually, I might need to see, I might need to share another link because I think it's showed my answers. Has anyone opened up the link? Has it worked?
It's showing up some results, I think.
It's showing
To
up
the results page.
Yeah, okay. Let me just share a link again. Can you see if you can, let me share the link again. Okay. Now, if you try this one, it should take you to the quiz. Yeah, there's 20 questions. If anyone has any problem accessing it, if you let me know.
Looks okay now. What
Yeah.
question?
Mm-hmm. Then once you're done, if you can type in the chat box what it came out as.
Okay.
Okay, you can't open it. I'm just going to see if I can share another link with you. Perhaps try again, if you can open it. Okay, if you managed to complete it, if you can type in what your learning style was, what your more dominant learning style was. I can see a couple of people have just joined. If you just joined, we're just doing this quiz, which is in the chat. There's a link there, just to find out about your learning styles. Okay, excellent. So somebody shares those results, and it seems like more dominantly you're a visual learner, and another visual learner, 60%. Okay, good. Is there anyone who'd like to share? They can unmute themselves and let us know. And I don't know whether it surprised you to see what your learning style was, or whether you were, knew that that's how you learn. Is there anyone who'd like to share their results?
Mine is auditory 20%,
Mm-hmm.
visual 50%, tactile 30%. I'm a
Mm-hmm. Okay.
visual learner.
Visual, yeah, yeah, visual learner. Okay, lots of people seem to be visual learners actually. Um, yep, I can see another one, visual. Anybody else like to share, or I mean, was anyone want to share who was surprised by the way in which they have come up? Okay, everyone seems to be mostly visual learners. Okay, so that's, I guess, really important for us to remember that the visual learning is really, really important. And by visual, it is them seeing things and trying to image things. So like, sets of instructions, when you have pictures with them rather than just a list of words, these sorts of things will stick with the child better rather than, lots and lots of words on a page. We as well, so if we are more dominant like visual learners, we'll probably plan our lessons in a similar way. But then obviously we should remember that there will be some children who need tactile or kinesthetic um, resources or forms of learning, and also auditory. So the best lessons are lessons that cater for obviously all three. So when we're planning lessons, when we're planning our activities, we should be thinking that how is my lesson going to adapt or facilitate somebody who's an auditory learner? How is it going to help somebody who's visual, and how is it going to help someone that's tactile? So it's important that we use that in our planning when we're doing our activities. So here I've got a table, if you can see that, the different types of learning we've just spoken about, and what sorts of ideas or what sort of activities you can do in order to help those learners. So, visually, you could make posters or mind maps, to post-it notes, YouTube clips, color coding. These sorts of things really help the learning to stick in the children's minds. If there were more auditory learners, what are you going to play for them? What are they going to listen to? What sorts of questions are you going to ask, and what are the answering in the classroom? So you need good questioning in your activities to ensure that the question and answer is of good quality for the children to learn from that. Mnemonics are really good, just having letters to stand for something. Like I'm just thinking of an English example. So when you have because, to help the children to spell the word because, you have you can have big elephants, and it goes on, or north, south, east, and west. They have never eat shredded wheat. So these things help the children. You take the first letter from something that you want them to learn, and make up something so that can they can say it and hear it and memorize it. Also, songs and rhymes are really important. I mean, we know from recitation of the Holy Quran that children learn and they memorize things from listening to it and reciting it and repeating it. In the same way, when we do, teach them rhymes, at school, they will learn much easily, more better, when they have got a rhyme or something behind it to help them to remember it and recite it. So also we have kinesthetic learners. So these are children or even adults who prefer things like actually doing something. So they might be taking notes, they'll be writing something down. They may be making something. They may actually go out and do something. So like on a visit, on a trip, they may be playing a game to do with what they're doing, learning about construct posters and other revision resources. So they actually like to do things rather than just watching and listening. So these are, when we're planning our activities, these it's important to know these in order to these areas or these styles of learning in order to plan the best activities. Now, and we should, going back to, our previous sessions when we spoke about behavior, one of the most important things was to know your children. So to know the children in your class. So when we know our children, when we get to know them, we will know, are they more visual learners? Are they more auditory learners? Are they more kinesthetic learners? So the more we know the children, the more we can cater for them as well. So that relationship with the children, what works with your children in the classroom, will help you to plan those activities. We have, the MUS books, which are great, and you've got the theory and the structure is given to you there. But how are you going to use that in order to cater for these learning styles in the best way for your children? So can you find like a YouTube clip connected to what you're learning about from, book 5, that you could play to them to help them with that learning? So it's about knowing the children as well. Yeah, it's really important, that relationship. Okay, so now, like I said, I want this to be something that you are, also doing the work, because when we go on trainings, we can learn and lots of things, but actually doing them is something different. So I've taken here just an example from book one, and the concept here was, this is from the teacher's guide, learning the first line of the kalma. Okay, so la ilaha illallah. So let's say you were teaching that to your class. I'd like you all to think of a way in which you would teach this in a kinesthetic way, an auditory way, and a visual way. Okay, so I'll just give you 1 minute or 2 minutes to have a think. So think, maybe make a note of what sort of way would you teach this to the children in order to help them with their learning. And then I'd like some people to please share their ideas. Okay. Okay, excellent. So maybe if we could have some volunteers to share their ideas, please. You can just tell us which form or which learning style it is that you're referring to, and what you might do in order to facilitate the learning there.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Yeah, I would do the kinesthetic way, and like I would ask my children to pull out their first finger, the pointer finger, and say La ilaha illallah. That means Allah. There is only one God, and there is no God but Allah.
Yeah.
So it would, immediately remind them to,
Yeah,
of the first line.
Sure.
And I think that works for very young children, children of ages between, I guess, 3 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it will
that's
be easy
great.
for them to remember.
Sure. Yep. Excellent. And then that learning stays with them. I mean, even now, if you've learned that when you were a child and you're older, you'll just automatically think, la, and you have think about your one finger that you represented it with. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Has anyone got an idea or example for either auditory or visual?
For auditory,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for auditory, I can explain. I can basically explain this verse, that how it is composed of, like in a simple way.
Mm-hmm.
That for example, it says that there is no God but Allah. So which means that there is only one, and that is Allah.
Yeah.
So this is for the auditory.
Yeah,
And for the other one, for visual, for the visual, I can I can ask them to imagine one I mean Allah as one light that is basically lighting the whole universe. So that is one light that represents that represents Allah. So in that way, they can understand that there is only one light.
Okay.
Or there is only one God.
Yeah, excellent, great, thank you. Would anyone else like to share any ideas?
Assalamu alaikum, sister. Yeah, I thought for like auditory, you could make it into a rhyme or like a song or sort of like a tune. These children who remember like tunes, and then you make it into a sort of not a song, I shouldn't say that, but like into a tune,
it's got some sort of
method,
rhythm,
a rhythm, and get them to sort of sing it every time they come into class. That would be a good way to learn it.
Yeah, excellent, great, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Yeah, Okay, great. And actually the teacher plan, the teacher lesson guide does give you, you know, we've got it down here, you'll see in the taskbar, use hand gestures. So it's giving us some ideas as well of this visual learning and the kinesthetic learning, which is great. And I think what we highlighted with your examples that you shared was that this learning that we give them through these different, you know, learning styles instill in the children's mind. So much so that when they're, you know, like I said before, they're so much older, it comes back to that learning style that, you know, that representation that you gave them. So the idea the brother gave of the light and the one light, you know, over everything. So these ideas come to the children's mind to help them to understand them even at a, you know, later time once they're older too. Another activity I thought might be useful when you're doing this, so La ilaha illallah, you could maybe have the words written out, and sometimes like we would do in English with the children in school, you would, you know, a sentence, you might mix up the words, so they have word cards and perhaps they can put the words into order, so they're learning the different parts of that La ilaha illallah, and like the brother said about the meaning of this and thinking about what each word means as they order these words. So having something tangible in their hands so that they can actually see these words as well helps them. We've got a brother giving an idea of an Islamic nasheed. Yes, and there's lots out there actually for this. And really, when you listen to them, they kind of play again and again in your mind. So it does help you to remember them. Excellent. And I'm sure everyone, and so, you know, all teachers are different, and we all have lots of different ideas. So that's why it's always really good to share this practice with each other. Now I'm going to move on to talking about Bloom's taxonomy. I'm not sure how many of you know about Bloom's, but Bloom was a Benjamin Bloom in the 1990s. He did a lot of research about learning, and his taxonomy is a set of hierarchical models that just classify educational learning objectives. So it divides them into levels of difference that differ in their specificity and complexity. So how the children's learning can get more complicated as they learn things. So like we talked about the foundations, how can it get more complicated? How can they build on those foundations to get that learning into their minds and more advanced? So students use it for better learning and understanding of a subject, while teachers can incorporate this into our teaching. So again, once we know the children's learning styles, we can create activities for them. And then also obviously knowing the theory behind learning and how we can build on the learning, we can also design activities that will most benefit our children. So this was in the 1990s, and then it was updated recently in 2001, and I think there's also been another recent update. This was by one of his students, just a slight change to his taxonomy. So what his idea built on was this sort of idea, and I think it was 2005 actually it was adjusted again. Yeah, 2005. So this was your older version, and then the wording has sort of been sort of a bit revamped for you know, for now. Can you hear okay? Sorry, someone's saying there's some noise from the mic. Okay, so just to go through these stages, you've got these stages of questioning. So when we're teaching or when we're planning activities, we should build on these. So when you've got an idea or a concept that you want to teach the children, you should use this sort of hierarchy. So you start with knowledge or memory. So it's like basic facts, okay? Then you build on some sort of comprehension. You got application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Now I'm going to explain this in a bit more detail. So I've got here an example that I've put together, thinking about Imam Hussein alayhi salam and Muharram, let's say. Okay, so if we start with the knowledge and memory, you're just thinking about general facts: who, what, where, and when. So these are quite simple for children to recall because it's just something you've told them. So as long as they've got good memories, or you've, you know, instilled it in them, maybe with a rhyme or, you know, a lot of repetitiveness, they've remembered this. So where was Imam Hussein alayhi salam martyred? So they would say Karbala, because that's something you've taught them and it's just a fact. Okay, you might ask them when it was, who was there. This is the facts of the story. Then comprehension comes along. So this is building on the learning. Why and how, in what way? So, okay, so they're understanding a bit more. So they know that Imam Hussein alayhi salam went to Karbala. So summarize the story of Karbala. So they've learned a bit more. It's not just that it was in Karbala. It was, you know, what happened? What were the steps of the story? Summarize the story, because they're understanding what happened in this event. Then comes the application. And this is where you imagine, predict, think about if, then, or how. So you're taking this learning deeper. And you might think, you might ask the children here, what would it be like if you were present in Karbala? So if they could think that they were there, what sorts of things would they be saying? So it would help you to understand as well, do they really understand what it was like there? Would they be saying that, I was watching TV or something? How much have they understood from the story of Karbala and what's happening, and they're able to explain to you how they would be feeling. Okay. Then comes the analysis, and this is where you begin to compare, identify, analyze, justify, or defend what is being learned. Okay, and again, going back to the same example, to talking about Muharram, you might outline the actions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala, and how would you have acted? So thinking about the steps he took. So maybe when he had offered water to Hur at that point, what would you have done if you had been in that position? Would you have done the same thing? Why perhaps did Imam Hussein alayhi salam do something different to what you would have done? And trying to analyze what's happened and how those different steps led to the events of Karbala. So it's looking at this in much more detail. As you can see, we started at a really simple step where it was just that this is an event that happened in Karbala, and then is building up into a lot more knowledge and a lot more understanding and a lot more skills from the child to be able to understand and take these steps. Obviously, as a teacher, you have to facilitate this, and this is an all-in-one step. So what we're thinking about is across the years, how do we build up on this sort of learning with the children? Then you've got the evaluation. So you decide, you judge, you evaluate something. So what would have happened? So think about it. What would have happened if Imam Hussein alayhi salam didn't leave Medina and go to Karbala? Could they have thought about, why was this step taken? Why did he leave Medina? What happened? And what would have happened if he didn't go? So are they able to understand the deeper meaning of what happened in Karbala? Then you've got the synthesis step, and here is about when you're creating something. So you're using all of your learning, all of these, steps that you've learned to create something. So could they, perhaps write a newspaper article about the events of the 10th of Muharram? Would they be able to explain all of these learning that they've got? So the story of Karbala, where this happened, why it happened, what could they, happen differently? What happened? Why did it happen? Explain these through an activity, creating something new based on what they've learned. Through this, they have embedded a lot of that learning, and they've gone through the stages of Bloom's taxonomy. And so this is kind of like at the end stage, you've kind of mastered that learning objective, or that area that you're learning about. I'm worried that I did a lot of talking there. Is there anybody who'd like to ask any questions about this? No? Okay, so I take it that it's okay. So that's good, because now I would like you actually to use this Bloom's taxonomy. And I haven't given you a specific lesson, but I would like you to go back thinking about your madrasa and any lessons that you've taught. And I'd like you to take a couple of minutes and think about how would you build on these areas of learning within that area. So just like I took that example of Muharram maybe and Imam Hussein alayhi salam, how could you question or what would you do in order to build on Bloom's taxonomy in these sorts of areas? And actually what I would like to do is, sorry, Brother Mesam, I wasn't able to ask you before, but can we do breakout rooms? Because I would like the teachers to work with each other. Are you there?
We can try. I never did that, but you're a host, so are you able to do that?
Oh, I'm host. Okay, yes. Okay, let me remember how to do this. Can you guide me a bit so I can? I haven't done it on Zoom before. Actually, I've done it on Teams.
No, I haven't done on Zoom either, so I'm not even sure if it's enabled
okay.
from the back settings. I'm looking at the
Okay.
to be honest, let me look at the participants. Right.
There should be an option to. Okay, but don't worry then.
No.
If we can just get everyone just to please think about it themselves and then share their ideas. Maybe somebody else has some experience. Yes, somebody just pointed out there are 2 versions, and that's correct. So, and given in books and has evaluation as a last step. So the newer version now says creating is a last step, but the older version had evaluation. Okay, so there is a discrepancy between the last 2 steps. Okay, so you can use them either way. Sorry, so the activity is for you to think about a lesson that you would teach at school in your madrasa, and tell us the steps. So write down the steps for these different areas of plume taxonomy. What questions could you ask, or what activities can you get the children to do? Okay. I think, Brother Misa, you have to give me permission to be able to do the breakout rooms. They should, I think only hosts can give permission for it.
Okay. And
we can do it a bit later.
you,
I would like to do it towards the end of the session if possible.
Okay, I can make you a host and then you can try it, because I'm looking at options.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make you a host and you can try.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll just give everyone a couple more minutes, 2 or 3 more minutes.
Can you try now?
Thank you. Okay, just 1 more minute, and then it'd be good if everyone can share some of their ideas. Okay, so hopefully you managed to get a good start at least on that activity. We have an example here. The event of Gadir, you could talk about the last Hajj. Ask the children to imagine themselves being there, about the amount of people there were who witnessed the event. Okay, you can get them to write imaginary witness accounts. Great, yeah. Okay, and we have the story of Yunus. You could watch a short cartoon on YouTube. Yeah, so you've got some visual learning there, auditory as well. Discuss the story and get the children to tell the story back. Yeah. Then apply the concept of making dua in their daily lives, the concept of never giving up. Brilliant, excellent. Okay, and then we've got the topic of kalma. Everyone could recite it. What's the meaning of it? Become Muslim, you get sawab. Good, yeah. Why there is God, no God, but one. Suppose if there was another God, yep. So you're thinking a bit deeper here. Ask everyone to come with a logic, okay, a logical answer for that. Yeah, brilliant, excellent. So those were some good ones. Would anybody like to share theirs on the mic?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum, Sister Erum again.
Walaikum salam. Okay.
Yeah, so I had this concept, but I think it could work on this taxonomy thing, that it would be qiyamah. So for the first instance, for the knowledge, you'd say, the basic understanding of Day of Judgment, heaven and hell. Then you can go into comprehension of why does there have to be a Day of Judgment? And then the application is, imagine if there wasn't a Day of Judgment, would it be fair? So you can go into sort of the Allah's adl. And analysis is where we see Qiyamah mentioned in the Quran. What's the purpose of Qiyamah? Why is it necessary? And looking at different type of people in the world, their behavior characteristics, and what would be their outcome in life. And then synthesis, suppose that it's now the Day of Judgment, and what would you hope to have with you at that time, or what position would you like to be in, or in that moment? And then you can evaluate it and decide what type of person would you like to be on that day, to help you in on the Qiyamah day. So deciding what character, is there any changes you need to bring in yourself, or so that yeah, that's it.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, that's great. And so you can see through all of those steps that you went through, how the learning builds up, and the understanding of that basic concept, that knowledge and memory that they had, is then able to be applied to themselves, and they're able to compare it to other things and get a really good understanding of what they're learning. Excellent. Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to share an example?
Assalamu alaikum, sister, again.
Walaikum salam.
Yeah, so again, starting by remembering to say Bismillah, it's like very basic. It's the first lessons that we teach in the madrasa. So, that is like then applying that to our daily lives and everything, and then reminding them to say Bismillah. And then comprehension, I would say that, just telling them why we say it, and why do we need to remember, because it makes Allah happy that we remember him, and it sends us special blessings and stuff like that. And then the third is the application, by saying like we could say this, what do you call this, the shaitan is driven away by saying this. And,
Great.
So they and then they again what do you call, they can like analyze, and then they can identify, and then they do stuff like that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, excellent. That's really good. Great, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to share?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I teach fiqh, and I don't think that would fall into all of the categories of this. I could tell them off by starting up, say I'm doing mutahirat, so I can tell them the things that are tahir, especially with the why and how. We're really not allowed to question things. So although they do ask me sometimes, but so I say that this is something that Allah has ordered us to do, and these things are tahir, and they make other things tahir. In the end, I kind of like give them examples of something that they can do. So I say that, say a child had done something on the carpet, how can I make that tahir? So I give them examples, but I don't think with fiqh all of the things come into it. I don't know, maybe you could tell me more.
No, I mean, I think you've got that's good. I mean, the good understanding there, and I suppose you can apply it as much as you can, and that is an important point. We can't always explain why for everything, but just the way you were explaining that, the way that you brought it around, I think that's a good way to do it. So just giving as much explanation as we can, but obviously everything, we can't justify everything for them. I think with the steps is trying to use it as much as possible. If you don't feel like maybe one a step doesn't apply, then you can, you know, you don't have to have done it. But I'm just thinking of something like creating something new for things that are, what it is basically is using that knowledge. So maybe they could design a poster about how to make things tahir, you know, what is it that makes you najis perhaps, or so they're just creating, using that knowledge that you've given them, but creating something. So we're not saying to them to make up new rules or, you know, to justify it, but to create something in order to show that learning. And maybe when you're within the evaluation, and you know, obviously your concepts are much deeper, but trying to decide and judging and maybe looking at, you know, how these things that are perhaps, you know, not tahir, that, you know, perhaps they why could it be? Maybe they could try to get an understanding. Maybe this could make you ill, or, you know, there's something behind it. So just trying to get some sort of deeper knowledge, but obviously it takes that to a more deeper level as well. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Okay. So again, when we're doing our lessons, really important when you plan your activities to go along these stages as you teach the children. Now, what we're going to talk about is a few points about outstanding sort of activities, or how to make your activities within your lesson outstanding. By outstanding, what I mean is, I'm not just referring to kind of like an Ofsted judgment. What I mean by outstanding is that the children are getting the maximum benefit of being in your classroom, that you are giving the children the best opportunity to learn. Okay, so when we're doing that, within our structure of our lesson, within the activities that we're doing in the lesson, we should have a starter. We should start our lesson in an inspiring way so that the children become engaged from the onset. Now, if we start with something really boring, something that they didn't like, I mean, let's say we just started with a test for them or something that we know that they're not going to click with as soon as we begin, they're going to be turned off before the lesson even starts. And we know that even as adults, that, you know, if it's something we haven't enjoyed in the first few seconds, it's going to be very hard for us to follow for the rest of the session. So let's inspire the children. The starter should be differentiated, which means that you're looking at all of the children. Now, when we are in a madrasa class, sometimes we've got children who have done all the books from 1 to 5, let's say, and you're in book 6. You might also have children that haven't done books maybe 1 to 3, and they're also with you. So we have to remember that some children are at different stages. And again, it goes back to having that relationship with the children and knowing them. So knowing where the children have come from, what's their prior learning, have they learned all of these things before, or some of these concepts going to be new? But the reason you have to differentiate is, I mean, let's say we're going to teach about let's say we're going to teach about the kalma. Let's say the children have already learned the kalma. You can't spend your whole time revising or going over and trying to teach that one child who doesn't know it during that time. You have to differentiate it so that he can access it, but also those who are learning further are able to learn too. So it's got to be something catching for them, for everyone that's there, not just, you know, 1 or 2 learners. The lesson starters can make or break a lesson. Okay, so it is really important that you start your lesson in the best way. It sets the tone for the lesson. So the starter allows the teacher to introduce the new learning. So when you're doing your activity, when you're doing your lesson, your starter will help you to introduce what you're going to teach. It should also consolidate previous learning. Okay, so revisit or remind the children of something they've learned before, linked to this, because we're always building on knowledge. Starters should link to the rest of the lesson as well. Okay, so obviously whatever you're going to start your lesson with is going to lead into your activities and what your lesson is going to be about. Now, they do say, you know, a big no-no is worksheets, word searches, simple questions and answers, because they say that these start to, you know, put children off. I'm talking about the starters. If you've got, you know, word searches and activities like this in your main activity, that's fine. But in the beginning, make sure it's something active and something inspiring for the children to engage in. Okay, so maybe a quick video clip. I think we've got some ideas. Yeah, there are some ideas which I'll share with you. But actually, I would like you to think about a lesson that you've started that you think went really well. Can anyone share a good lesson starter with us? An activity you did in your lesson starter that engaged the children?
Assalamualaikum.
Welcome, sir.
So in one of my lessons, there was a homework where they had to make their own sadqa box. So when the next lesson came in, so the children all showed their own sadqa boxes, and it was exciting because it was all different, and and creative. So yeah, we had a good start then.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Yeah, so that's good. You got them engaged even before the lesson, so that's good. And then when they started the lesson, they're all excited about this thing that they're going to share. That's great, lovely. Anybody else able to share another interesting starter that they've had that's engaged the children? No? Okay. I mean, some examples that I could think of is maybe actually taking the children outside into the playground or into the park or the area that you have outside your classroom, perhaps, and starting a lesson there with something linked to what you're learning about. So I'm just thinking, I'm going back to, let's say, Usul You might take them to a tree and just stand by the tree and think about how this tree is going to link into your roots and your branches of religion. So they can then, instill something in the mind, but it's something different as well, rather than opening up the textbook and reading the passage or the paragraphs from the textbook, doing something in order to introduce that topic in a bit more of an inspiring way. Sometimes you might have pictures shown on the board, and go get the children to think about, what do these pictures have to do? What do you think we're learning about today? Get them thinking. You might have a puzzle to do with what you're learning about. Sometimes, even like something really simple like hangman, you play a quick game of hangman and say, we're learning about something really important today, a special event that happened in Islamic history, and let's see if you can guess what we're learning about today. So engage them in some sort of way in the beginning. Now, here are some examples. So you could have some books, you could do a bit of drama, stories. Stories are always a really good way to get the children engaged in something that they're learning about. Pictures, film, art, poetry, props. Props are really good. So like we had the example of the boxes, showing them things, making it visual again for those children who are like visual things. If you're just telling a story, having some props there to tell the story along with you. And I just have somebody's idea was Kahoot. Yep. So you can have a Kahoot to get them engaged. You can also through that see what is their previous learning. What do they know? Where are they at? Okay. So engaging ways in which to get the children engaged in your starting activities in your lessons. Okay. So that's a starter. You have planned a nice activity, then you need to have a plenary, which is the ending of your lesson. So a lot of the time, you have a really good lesson, you started it well, you've done a really good activity with the children, and then all of a sudden it's time to finish, just like, let's pack up and let's go. However, that learning that the children have done always needs to be summarized and recapped before you finish your lesson. So an outstanding plenary gives the opportunity for children to be made explicitly aware of the learning which has taken place. So you ask them, what have you learned today? Okay, so hopefully whatever your objective for the lesson is, so let's say learning the first line of the kalma, they will be able to say that I learned the first line. Okay, so what is it that they've done today? Perhaps if they haven't, maybe they could say, I've learned the first few words of the first line. So able to feel some sort of accomplishment for what they've done in the lesson. An outstanding plenary checks on the success children have experienced in meeting the learning objectives and the success criteria. So what was it that they were, aiming to learn in this lesson, and have they managed to learn it? And it's important that the children assess this as well as you, because as teachers, we'll be assessing it. So you can see, have they learned the objective or not? But for the children to get some sort of, feedback for themselves, it's a good idea for them to reiterate their learning, that what they've learned today. So we have different activities like exit cards. Before the children leave the classroom, you can say to them, I want you to tell me one thing that you learned new today, and then you can go. Okay, so, or you could get them to have a post-it note, and on the post-it note, they write what they learned today. They could even do a simple thumbs up and thumbs down about whatever you were learning about today. They could say whether they've understood it, or perhaps maybe they're still a bit unsure about it, or they haven't understood it at all, just by their thumbs. Yep, so these are activities for them to give themselves some sort of instant assessment feedback. And the plenary should bring together all of the learning to reinforce the outcome. So you should summarize what you've learned in that lesson. So just quickly to summarize anything that you did in that session. So today we went outside and we looked at the tree because we were looking at the roots of our religion, and the roots of our religion are, and then you repeat them, and you summarize that learning before the children move on to their playtime, break time, other things. Okay, so it's important that we start the lesson well with a nice activity and we end it with a nice activity. Even Kahoots, like we could start them and use them as a quiz at the beginning, but also could be used at the end of a session. So trying to use these different learning ideas or activities that you have to enhance that learning with throughout the lesson. It's not just the activity time. Yeah. So you can, you should clarify what you're learning today. So at the end of a lesson today, say, today we learned about this, and get the children to say how they felt about that. Okay, celebrate and recognize of achievement, recognize what they've learned today. It's important that the children get some sort of recognition for what they've done in this lesson. They're not just there just to take everything in and then just leave. They've done something in this lesson. They've taken part in this activity. Celebrate, maybe share some of the work the children have done, or their comments or what they would like to share, so that you recognize what they've done in that lesson. Now, I'm just going to touch upon very quickly homework, because homework is a very kind of sometimes a taboo subject, let's say, because somehow it's got advantages and disadvantages. And it could be a good way to enhance learning. However, it could also mean that parents do it for the children. You don't really get to see what the child can do. So here are some advantages and disadvantages. However, the homework should, if you are setting homework and activities for homework, it should be something that embeds learning and it helps them to prepare for future learning. Okay, so again, it suggests not worksheets or copying. Get them to do something. Okay, something like an activity which is more focused on maybe talking and discussing. So Islamic studies is such a great, lovely subject that they can talk to their parents about their thoughts or what their parents think about it. They can learn more about things from their parents. So discussion is really useful. Talking, and then again creating, like we had before, creating something based on their learning. So how can they show what they've learned? Maybe giving them further research. So maybe you can talk to your parents a bit more about this topic. And so what can they learn? Or maybe you can talk to your grandparents about this. What can they learn? Okay, and it should always be planned. It's not just, okay, we've done questions 1 to 5. Now finish questions 6 and 7 for homework. Think about it from beforehand. What is it that you want them to do and why? I mean, what's the point in them doing that? It's not just so that the activity is finished, the page is finished, and you can move on the next lesson. What are they going to learn from it? Yeah, so homework needs to be also planned. So here again are some examples: leaflets, posters, sketches or diagrams, writing a diary. So somebody had an example, I think they were talking about Hajj, or was it either Gadir, and maybe having, an example of writing a diary. Yeah. Okay. Writing maybe a rhyme. Um, okay. Yes, and illustrations and photos. Outstanding, again, what I was saying, outstanding is basically trying to get the best learning. Okay. For outstanding homework, what homework can you give to the children to get the best outcome from them? Okay. Right, and I'm wary of the time. Just probably 5 more minutes then. I'm just going to talk quickly about Brunner, who is also another educational theorist, who talked about the spiral curriculum. And what he spoke about is how our learning builds on from what we've learned previously. So a student revisits a topic, theme, or subject. So as the children learn, they need to go back to their prior learning and build on it. So Alhamdulillah, MUS books do this really well. You've got books 1 to 7, and they build on the learning each time, which is great. And what we need to do, though, is refer back to the learning from before and then build on it. We need to be wary again of those children who haven't had that prior learning, who we might need to give more assistance to or more support to. Okay, and what happens is that when we do the spiral learning, the children go through steps of, wondering what something is, developing it, then understanding it. And they keep doing that. It was part of their spiral learning. So they revisit things. So I'm going to give you an example of this, like just thinking about them, talking about Ramadan. So we would teach Ramadan to all of our children in madrasa. But the idea is how are we going to build on this? So how will the teaching of Ramadan be different for a 5-year-old and be different for a 15-year-old? What are you going to be doing within it? So each time it's not going to be Ramadan is a month of fasting. You fast from sunrise to sunset. It's not those basic things. You are going to then start to build on it. What should and shouldn't you do during fasting? What was the purpose of fasting? What can we learn from fasting? What does it affect on our bodies of fasting? So taking it deeper. And this is what we need to make sure as we build up across the year groups, thinking about, let's say you teach book 4, thinking about what have the children learned before they've come to me about Ramadan, and what are they going to learn after. So what do I need to make sure they know at this stage when they're with me? And again, the books will help you with that, but it's important you know what they've learned before, and you can think about what they're learning on after. Because it's like I was saying before, it'd be really boring for the children if every time, if let's say Muharram comes, every time all they learn is that Imam Hussein alayhi salam went to Karbala, and maybe the couple of steps or things that happened on the 10th of Muharram. They need to build on this. So we always need to be aware of what's learned prior and what's going to be learned in the future. Okay. I'm not going to go through that. Okay, so then actually there was an activity, but I just want to check. I think we're pretty much out of time. Is that right, Brother Misa?
Yeah, but that's fine. I think we can carry on.
You're going to carry on? Okay. So my last, activity, again, I wanted to do breakout rooms, but I can't. Normally a button, as something comes up to say form breakout rooms, but I can't see it today. But I wanted you to go into groups and actually plan an outstanding lesson. So actually thinking about what are the children going to do at the start of the lesson? What have the children learned previously? What activities can the children complete during your activity? And how are you going to end that lesson? So actually planning out and thinking about a lesson. So because I can't do a breakout room, I would actually just I think if you can just do it yourselves, and perhaps we can have some people who haven't, said anything during our session today to give some input. So the idea is that you're now thinking, let's say you can plan your next lesson. So let's say you've got a lesson next week. What's your topic for that lesson? How can you make sure that you are planning the activities in the right way, in a fun, engaging, outstanding way in order to get the most out of the lesson for your children? Okay, so I'm going to give you about I think I'd say 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes to plan a lesson. It's just rough notes. What would you do in this lesson? Okay. And if you'd like some ideas, I'm here. You can always unmute yourself and ask, or in the chat box. And then we can, share the ideas at the end. So it's 10:15. So, 11:15. So 11:20, I'd like you all to come back with some ideas, inshallah. So 5 minutes, please. Any questions? Okay, great. So if we can just give you 5 minutes then to start that. Okay, just a couple more minutes. Okay, I'm just going to give one more minute. I know this isn't enough time really to plan a whole lesson, but hopefully you've got some ideas down. And it's good to see some of you sharing your ideas in the chat box, because this is excellent, because this is sharing of good practice. You're all doing these things around, around the country in different madrasas. So it's great to share these ideas of yours with others. Okay, so if we come back together then, and I'll just have a look at some of the examples that were given. So we'd start Sister Farah said that she'd start with 4 or 5 questions from the previous lesson, which is great because you're recapping what they've learned before. And hopefully before you even start your lesson, you'll be able to identify any gaps in learning. So that's great. And you'll have some slides prepared so that you can match the answer. So it's very quick. You're not spending, the whole lesson recapping the previous lesson. Nice and quick activity. That's great. Thank you. And Brother Karar has said that he would start with a spider diagram, and that's great. So that's a nice visual. It's visual and then also kinesthetic, because they're doing something, they're writing their ideas down. You've also got some lovely, or visual auditory activities. You've got VR, Karbala, brilliant. So you've got lots of ideas there for engaging ways in which to get them in, learning there. And you've got the Kahoot there, excellent. Then we've got the topic of hijab, okay? Show diagrams, excellent. So again, that's very visual. Incorrect hijab, correct hijab. So it's all good us saying that we need to wear hijab, but how is what's correct, what's not correct visually. That's great. And making links to the Quran, that's really good. You start discussion of what children already know and remember. Thank you, just Asia. That's a good start. Excellent. And then we've got people in Karbala, and you ask them what the children already know. And this is really important, because we don't want to just keep telling the children the same facts again and again, because they'll get bored. They're going to switch off. We need to tell them more about what they want to know about. So excellent. And then you also, if there are any gaps in the learning, fill them in. Excellent. Read the story with some visuals, try and correlate the relation of the story with other personalities in Karbala. That's excellent. So that's, you're using here a lot of the Bloom's taxonomy, building on that learning, because you're making a comparison to another personality in Karbala. Excellent. Imagine the environment and the lesson by asking what they've learned from this personality. Brilliant. That's great. And then Sister Asia has come back and said the children take turns to read. That's really important. Children love being part of the story. So getting them to read, maybe getting them to act it out. And you've written sequencing the story, excellent, and role play, brilliant. And then we've got Sister Najma saying to teach them about the event of Gadir, why we call it Gadir, Al-Akbar, and why celebrating is so important, relating it to the ayah. So making lots of links there to learning. And again, this might be prior learning. So maybe they've learned Surah Madiyah before. Are you making a link to something they've learned before and say, oh, look, look at that surah that you learned about. We can now learn a bit more about this. Homework to make posters or a card. That's lovely, excellent. And we've got a brother here talking about the Battle of Uhud. Previous learning about other battles. Great. Okay, talking about the Battle of Badr and thinking about the positions of the army on the background on the battle. All have lots of ideas of activities to share, and this is basically, as teachers, we're all different and we can all learn a lot from each other. So that was really useful. I don't know, Brother Mason, maybe this chat could be shared with everyone, because it's got ideas now. It's like a resource of teaching ideas from the participants today. Perhaps this could be shared with them afterwards, so that they could refer
Inshallah,
to. Yeah.
Inshallah, we'll look into this.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any questions before we finish?
Assalamu alaikum, sister.
Welcome, Sam.
I want to ask, if you have a child is really quiet in your class, and even you keep asking the child to participate or read or something, but he is too shy. I don't know what to do about that child then. It's so hard.
Yeah, that can be really difficult, and actually sometimes as a teacher a little bit frustrating, because you want them to be part of the activity, but I think you need to find a way in which to get you, as long as they're showing their learning. So perhaps they could be writing something or drawing something. We've had some children actually have like a behavior called selective mutism, and they actually don't talk in front of specific people. So sometimes it can be something a bit more, ingrown, but sometimes they're just a bit too shy of the unfamiliar, environment that they're in, perhaps. But one is trying to make them more comfortable and giving them something that they would be happy to do. So if they're not happy to talk, maybe they could write it. Maybe they could tell somebody next to them the answer and they could say it for them. I know it's facilitating in a different way, but we have to look at everybody's different needs and thinking about how we can make them more comfortable and then make them more part of our activity. Yeah? Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And I think we need to stop there now. I think if you can just, one thing to go away with is just, as at the end of any training, just thinking about what can you take away from the session and what might you change or improve. A lot of the courses I've been on always remind me that, whatever you put into practice straight away is what you've learned from a training. So don't think, about maybe you've thought of an idea today that you're going to use. Don't, leave it for another year or something. Try and put it into practice today, or, your next lesson, so that you've planned a lesson and you've done what you've learned, so that then it will be, yourself, it'll be ingrained in your learning. Yeah. Okay. And I think there is a attendance form to be filled in, and I think I'll hand back to you now, Brother Mason. Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's take a quick break. We'll make it until 11:35. Hopefully that's fine with everyone. I'll leave the session running, and then we can resume for the next topic at 11:35.